And the first one that we want to hit is the Databricks new generative AI model, DBRX, which they are also kind of calling Databricks. I think they're trying to make it catch on. Maybe that'll be their stock symbol when they IPO. But regardless of that, uh, what what do you think about that new generative AI model that they put out?
Well, the first thing you did blew my mind because I did not connect DBRX with Databricks. I don't know why. I'm an airhead, I guess. But three big things, three big takeaways that I mean, I thought it was a honestly a shocking announcement. We were just talking about Databricks the other day. I mean, there was almost no
Mhm.
clue that this was really coming. In part because the first big shocking thing about it was how fast and really how inexpensively. I don't have it up right now, but I think it was 3 months. They started this beginning of this year. I
Yes.
mean, three
Mhm.
months to roll this thing out, $10 million investment. And granted, that's a little bit of a misnomer because it was really part of their acquisition. And so there's a little bit to that, but it's still shocking how fast and then how performant it appears to be, at least compared to the other open source AI models. And so, what it really I think is striking is how quickly the industry is learning and
Yes.
what that
Mhm.
means to how quickly we're going to see additional development, which then leads to the second one, and that is they've chosen to make this open source. We've been having this sort of ongoing conversation about what's going on in the open source space, how it applies in AI. And I think, and I'm not sure if we've even talked about this one. There was an article recently that I read that talked about how you almost can't even consider open source AI in the same breath as traditional open source because it is so different. There's some stuff that's happening this week, which we'll tease for next week about a potential catastrophic issue with a big open source platform. So it's like, I
Mhm.
think open source is sort of under assault. And yet, here we have Databricks releasing this as an open source model. But like every other AI open source model we've seen, not in the traditional way we think of open source. It's the sort of restricted license and a big question mark as to what that's going to mean. So I think this is another salvo in the AI wars in general, specifically on the open source side, and I think it's an important entrance into that space that I think is really interesting. And then the third piece that I took away that was really sort of eye opening is that, at least my read, and I think they alluded to this, but it's a little bit of reading between the lines, is that they're almost putting this to me as like a proof of concept. So they're really sort of saying, hey, you enterprises, if you want to build your own LLM using proprietary data that, by the way, we Databricks are helping you manage,
Mhm.
we can help you do that. And that it's almost like this, putting this thing out there and doing it so fast, so inexpensively, is a major shot across the bow to say you don't have to rely on these big open or no, these big big tech LLMs. You
Mhm.
can build your own proprietary, and we can help you do that. And that's going to tie into some of the other conversation we're having today about a lot of the fear around these LLMs. So I think it was a really interesting announcement that frankly, from my perspective, came almost out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I like how Databricks is basically making this, like as you said, a proof of concept. Reminds me a little bit of what like Google does with the Pixel phones to say, here is a reference standard that you can use of the current latest and greatest, and this is what you can. This is a starting point for figuring out how to build an app on Android and to build new capabilities onto our mobile platform. Databricks has done something similar. And of course, they are in the entire business of helping large Fortune 500 organizations to build their own models. So now they say, here's how we did it for $10 million. Now you can spend $10 million with us to get the same thing or to have a better result than you've been trying to do. You've been trying to do this whole thing piecemeal and figure out how to build this LLM from scratch or how to fine tune something but not getting the results you're looking for, or you've been playing with this thing called retrieval augmented generation and you're able to get a little bit of your own data in this model, but you weren't quite able to make it all work. So Databricks is saying now we have this whole end-to-end process and we can show you exactly what it looks like at the end. And I think that's a key difference because we're starting to see press releases from other startups that are saying we are also end-to-end large language model generation, generative AI platforms that can help you build your own model. Databricks has already proven that they can get all the way to the endpoint of having this gigantic large language model that will get basically as big as any enterprise, normal enterprise will care about. You're always going to have these hyperscalers that care about the even bigger models, the 50 billion, 100 billion, 200 billion parameters models. But most companies are going to want to keep it to kind of a few billion parameters, something that they can actually run and actually be able to afford the bill for at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and I know we're going to be talking a little bit about the whole ROI about AI later, and I
Mhm.
think this ties into that conversation. But one of the things that I think is interesting is they almost buried in there was this really interesting development from a technology perspective or from an innovation perspective of how they approached it, is that they're using this interesting approach that sort of abstracts away, where they're not having to apply every parameter against every query,
Right.
every interaction, and that means your token load is lower, and it means it's faster, and that was a huge part. So I think we're going to see that replicated. I think that's a huge innovation that I think is really going to open the door. And I think it's also going to sort of rekindle the debate. We've been talking a
Mhm.
little bit about this idea of the AI app sitting on top of the LLM layer. And there's another thing and a new term that's being thrown around, agentic AI, this idea of the AI agent that is basically this version of leveraging both of these. And I have, until this announcement, I was sort of the mindset that that's where all the innovation in the traditional enterprise was going to take place. That it didn't make sense to be building your own LLM, but this sort of changes that. I think. I mean, I think $10 million, while is a lot of money, if you are a Fortune 200 company, that is completely within the realm of a spend target that you could absolutely invest if you got enough value out of that. So I think it is really game changing. I think in many ways. I think it is too early to tell, but I think it could be really, really, really fascinating.
Right. A few weeks ago, we talked about the city of Birmingham and its challenges with an ERP upgrade, which has gone into the hundreds of millions. And although that was a project gone bad, it is not wild to think about an ERP upgrade taking $100 million and that being budgeted into a Fortune 500 IT budget. Compared to that, uh, $10 million to actually build an AI model that is usable by your entire employee base seems reasonable, quite frankly. And this mixture of experts effort that you were talking about, I think that is going to be much like retrieval augmented generation RAG, as another thing that we're going to talk about. I don't think MOE is a very good acronym, but we'll figure that part later. But this mixture of experts idea, I think, is something that CIOs will have to think about. Are we doing just a standard large language model, or are we doing a mixture of experts large language model that is more efficient? Uh,
Yeah, and I know we need to move on, but I do think you bring up the city of Birmingham, and that's the part that worries me about this entire conversation. Well, $10 million is absolutely within the spend ratio, and certainly companies like Databricks are going to be making the case that we can help you do this, and clearly the big SIs are going to be out there pushing this as well. It does speak to the fact that your traditional enterprise often has challenges with these sort of complex endeavors and executing well, or at least can run into them, and that's going to be the big question mark. Is can organizations actually execute on this? Can they do it effectively? Do these $10 million spends turn into $100 million explosions? And are they do become train wrecks, especially because this now is harvesting all of the data within the system? And so I think there's still so many questions. We're going to be talking about some of that today. So this was a great way to lead off because it hints at all these other sort of news items that also hit that touch on all these different elements of the sort of the AI challenge for the CIO.
right.